Hello again, my name is Andrew Buda and I'm an attorney here in Florida. I want to talk to you today about questions that I've been getting recently, the past couple of days, from colleagues, from friends, from clients, from family members. Everybody wants to know, how long does a jury usually take to make up a decision? Well, that's because this Kyle Rittenhouse case is going on and it's very polarizing. People have views one way or the other. A lot of it is political views. A lot of it doesn't actually look at the facts of the case. We're not going to get into that in this video. In this video, we're going to specifically focus on how long does a jury typically take to render a verdict in a trial. The first things that you need to understand in order to answer that question is just what is a jury. Now, I am licensed to practice in all federal courts in the United States as well as the state of Florida. And I just want to talk about in Florida, there's a misconception. Everybody sees on TV that you have a jury of 12 people. Well, I want to tell you that that is not actually true unless it's a capital case. In a capital case, you get 12 jurors plus alternate jurors, and all other cases you get 6 jurors and alternate jurors. The purpose of alternate jurors is that sometimes emergencies happen with members of the panel and they are unable to attend. They could be medical emergencies, personal emergencies, or just conflicts in their schedule. So it's always good practice to have alternate jurors until deliberations start. That way, if something does occur, and trust me, I've been there. I've seen that happen where luckily we had enough jurors because one thing or another, one of the jurors got sick and violently sick, and we had to use an alternate juror. And we don't tell jurors typically that they're alternate jurors until after the case is completely closed, because we want all the jurors on the panel to think that they are the actual jurors, because we want them to pay attention and follow the law and hear all the evidence. If they thought they were alternate jurors, sometimes they could not pay attention. So what a jury is it's composed of members of the community, and that's what you have a right to by the Constitution, a jury of your peers. And both sides ask a lot of questions. If you've ever been a part of a jury, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I would advise you. It's very interesting to see the jury process. I've picked many juries myself, both as a prosecutor and now as a defense attorney, and I can tell you that there are reasons for the questions that attorneys ask. Basically, we just want to know that you're going to be fair and impartial, meaning that you're not going to see somebody that's charged with, say, a murder charge and make up your mind prior to hearing all the evidence. And that's what the law says, is there's a presumption of innocence to somebody that's in a trial, and that presumption stays with a person from the very beginning of the trial all the way until the case is closed and the jury renders a verdict. Up until that moment, that person is presumed innocent. And that's a very important aspect of our law and the Constitution, is that preservation of innocence, the presumption of innocence. So back to the ultimate question. What is taking so long? What do I think this means because it's taking so long? Let me tell you this. When you pick a jury, typically the things that experienced trial attorneys want is they want somebody that they think is going to be the leader of the pack. A lot of times when I'm picking a jury and the jury is seated, most of the time I can pick who's going to be what they call the foreperson of that jury, and that person is kind of in charge. They get to pick amongst themselves who that person is going to be, but they have a very strong personality and they kind of take control in the back. Typically, when you're picking a jury, you want to pick one person like that. And again, you want them to be fair and impartial, but let's be real. The state has an obligation to be fair. However, I can tell you that the state wants to prove their case, so they're going to try to find somebody that they think is going to lean a little bit more to the conservative enforcement of the law side. And then the opposite is true for the defense. The defense is going to want somebody that's going to say, well, I don't maybe like police. Obviously, if somebody says that, that's a bias. They have to be kicked out. But, there's things that you can questions that you can ask to try to determine and uncover, if you will, that would make you think, maybe this person's going to lean a little bit in my favor. The problem is, and I tell this to all my clients, is that you never know. You never know what another person who's sitting there and answering a few questions from you that you get to interact with for just a few hours and see them and get a very, very small snapshot of their prior life and their views of the world. It's hard to know what that person really is thinking. We've all experienced that. Think about going to a party. They say don't judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, most people do that. So you look at somebody and then you start talking to them. You say, wow, that person really surprised me by some of the things they said or some of the things that they do or maybe their job. So that's a really difficult problem with picking a jury, is that you never just really know what a person's thinking. And guess what? You could pick the best jury in the world and you could think that they're with you the entire trial. And this goes for whether you're prosecutor or whether you're the defense attorney, and you present all the evidence and you may think you have the strongest case in the world. I've been there. They go back and they come back and the verdict is opposite of what you thought it was going to be. I can tell you this, based on my experience, when I was a prosecutor, I can tell you that very quick verdicts a lot of times were for the defense, meaning if it was less than 10 minutes, they go back there and they just take a quick tally and a quick vote, and they say, all right, well, not guilty. Anybody have another opinion, think he's guilty? They do a tally, they come back, and they read the verdict. That's a 10-minute or less. Most of the time when I would see that, that would be the ultimate verdict of the jury, would be not guilty. I can tell you this, is that when I was a prosecutor, one of the benefits of my office was we had closed-circuit TV. That means that I had access to dozens and dozens of courtrooms, so I got to watch trials all day long. So I had a leg up, if you will. I've witnessed hundreds of trials, been part of many trials as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney now, and I can tell you the answer, as much as this may pain you, is you really never know. I can tell you that, as I said before, you usually want to have that alpha jury member. Sometimes there's two alphas, and in my experience, what happens is when the two people go back there and they have different opinions on guilty or not guilty, there's a little bit more discussions. If the evidence is not clear, then the jury members will spend more time reviewing it. They have access to all those videos. So if you're watching the Rittenhouse trial, there were a lot of videos. They get to take those videos back with them, and they get to watch those videos as many times as they want and explore that evidence. Now, it is a good thing for justice. Whether you think he's guilty or whether you think he's not guilty, it is great for justice when the jury takes this time. Here's why. Because they're not just going back there and just saying, okay, who thinks he's guilty? Let's vote. Okay, he's guilty. Go back. He's guilty. Or the opposite. Who thinks he's not guilty? They're not doing that. They're actually having a heated debate, discussion, and they're doing an analysis of the evidence like they should be. Now, I will say this. I've seen before where a jury will delay it by a few hours just because the judge says, oh, if you guys are still back there by 7 p.m. tonight, I'm going to order pizza for you. So I've seen that, unfortunately, where people say, well, we've been here all day. Let's get some free dinner out of this. I've known people myself that would probably want to partake in that, but that doesn't seem to be the case with the Rittenhouse trial. It's been over a full day of deliberations. They started again today for deliberations. So it appears that they are doing what they should do, their job, and they're doing a thorough analysis. Unfortunately, we don't know. Unless you actually sat in a jury, sat in a big case like this, you don't know what goes on in those deliberations. Now, I know that the juries always have, they're afforded privacy so that the media doesn't get them and question them and potentially cause them to be impartial, or to be render a verdict that maybe they wouldn't because of pressures from the public and the media. So that's why if you're watching the trial, they never show the jury because it's private. They don't want you to see who those people are. But unfortunately, the media gets a hold and figures out who was on the jury. They offer them money, and then sometimes you hear what goes on in there. I don't believe a lot of what they say. There is a really great movie. It's a very old movie. It's called 12 Angry Men, and it shows, the whole movie takes place in the jury room about a trial that, from the perspective of the evidence, it looks like the person was guilty, but you see the process that the jury goes through and they vote. And I like to think that that's how all juries do it, that they review everything and all the evidence, and they apply that evidence to the law and render a just verdict. But unfortunately, it's human nature is to just do what you think. and not what you should do. But that's what happens ultimately. If you watched the jury instructions, they were a little convoluted in this trial. I've never seen it done that way in Florida. Every trial I've been a part of, we actually have written jury instructions from the Florida Supreme Court. And the judges, and again, every trial that I've done, and I've done dozens and dozens of jury trials, is they will read verbatim the jury instructions because it's that important. They want the jury to understand and not have any questions on what's happening. And then they get a copy of that to take back to them. And the ultimate, the short version of the jury instructions is they take the evidence that was given to them that they heard and saw during the trial, and they apply that evidence, those facts, if you will, to the law as the judge instructs. That's part of the jury instructions, is the law, what the law is. And then they determine if the state has proved each element of the law beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they have proven that, then they render a verdict of guilty. If they haven't, beyond a reasonable doubt, then it's not guilty. And it's not one or the other. It is every single element of the law. So it is a heavy burden the state has. Again, we're not going to talk about, this video isn't meant to tell you what I think about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial or not. I'll gladly make that video if you'd like, based on what I saw, and I followed the trial, most of it, and reviewed most of the evidence myself, and I do have my opinions. But the point of the jury is to take all the evidence, apply it to the law, and determine if the state proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they have, then the verdict's going to be guilty. If not, then the verdict's going to be not guilty. So to answer the question that all my attorney friends, my family and friends and colleagues have asked me is, I have no idea, because you never know what another person's thinking. Everyone can agree with that, I'm sure. And I will just leave you with this, is that if it's taking this long, that means that it's probably not as straightforward. There could be one holdout, there could be two, there could be half people holding out. You never know. You never know what's going to happen. As time progresses, they may come back with questions. If the jury asks questions, that gives you a better idea of what they're getting hung up on, what potential problems could be. Maybe the attorneys didn't do a good enough job explaining what the job of the jury is. I can also tell you that when they have the lesser included charges, it gets confusing. And if the prosecutor doesn't do a good enough job explaining to them that they're supposed to start with the highest charge and work their way down, a lot of times they'll look at those and they get hung up on those and they get confused and they say, well, I think that he's not guilty on these charges, but maybe we don't like the fact that he was there and this or that, so let's find him guilty of something. So they do it incorrectly. And unfortunately, that's the job of the prosecutor, to do a really good job of explaining to them how exactly they're supposed to render that verdict and start with the highest charge and then work their way down based on the elements and the evidence that was presented. So that could be a hang-up. I'm sure in the next couple of hours we will get a better glimpse of questions from the jury, or if they render their verdict. And I'm excited to see what that verdict is. It's been a long trial. And if you have any questions, please leave questions or comments below. I will answer them as best I can, and I will probably do a follow-up video once the verdict is rendered. Thanks for watching.